The discrepancy was small at first, just $847 missing from Charles Bronson's residual check in February 1981. Charles might not have noticed it at all if he hadn't been going through his financial records while preparing for tax season. According to his contracts, Charles should have received $12,430 in residuals from television reruns of his older films. But the check from his talent agency, Morrison & Associates, was for only $11,583. Charles called his business manager, Patricia Chen, who had been handling his finances for 8 years. "Patricia, can you look into this residual payment? The numbers don't match what I'm expecting. I'll check with Morrison's accounting department. Sometimes there are legitimate deductions, union fees, agency commissions, taxes. But I'll verify everything." 2 days later, Patricia called back with disturbing news. "Charles, I've been through all the paperwork 3 times. There are no legitimate deductions that would account for that missing money. Either someone made a serious accounting error, or someone is skimming from your residuals." Charles had been with Morrison & Associates for 12 years. The agency was one of the most respected in Hollywood, representing A-list actors, directors, and writers. The agency's founder, Robert Morrison, was a legend in the business, a man who'd built his reputation on integrity and loyalty to his clients. But Robert had retired 5 years earlier, leaving the agency in the hands of his son, Michael Morrison, and a team of senior agents. "Patricia, I want you to audit every payment we've received from Morrison for the past 2 years. Every residual check, every appearance fee, every royalty payment. I want to know if this is an isolated incident or part of a pattern." The audit took 3 weeks and revealed a shocking truth. Charles had been systematically cheated out of small amounts from dozens of payments over the past 18 months. The total came to just over $23,000. But that wasn't the worst part. If Morrison & Associates was stealing from Charles Bronson, one of their biggest and most successful clients, what were they doing to their smaller, less powerful actors? Charles decided to investigate. He started by casually talking to other Morrison clients at industry parties and premieres. What he discovered made his blood boil. Janet Parker, a character actress who did mostly television work, mentioned that her residual check seemed smaller than expected. "But you know how it is," she said. "The accounting is so complicated, and Michael always explains it in a way that sounds legitimate." David Chen, a stuntman who worked regularly in action films, had noticed similar discrepancies. "I brought it up once, and Michael showed me all these deduction forms and commission structures. Made me feel stupid for questioning him." Sarah Williams, a young actress just starting her career, was more direct. "I think Michael Morrison is stealing from us, but I can't prove it. And even if I could, who would believe me? I need this agency more than they need me." Charles realized that Morrison was running a sophisticated embezzlement scheme, targeting clients who were either too trusting, too intimidated, or too dependent on the agency to question irregular payments. But Charles wasn't too trusting, too intimidated, or too dependent on anyone. He called Mickey Torino, a private investigator he'd worked with before. "Mickey, I need you to look into the financial practices at Morrison & Associates. Specifically, I need to know if they're systematically stealing from their clients." "That's a serious accusation, Charlie. What kind of evidence do you have?" Charles showed Mickey the audit results and told him about his conversations with other Morrison clients. "It looks like they're skimming small amounts from lots of different payments. Not enough for any one client to notice, but it probably adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars over time." Mickey was intrigued. "It's a smart scam, if that's what it is. Most actors don't understand the complicated accounting involved in residuals and royalties. They trust their agents to handle everything properly. Can you prove it?" "Maybe. I'll need to get access to Morrison's internal accounting records, which won't be easy. But I have some contacts who might be able to help." 3 weeks later, Mickey called with explosive news. "Charlie, you're not going to believe what I found. Michael Morrison has been running this scam for 3 years. He's stolen over $800,000 from his clients, and he's been using the money to fund a very expensive lifestyle. Mickey had obtained copies of Morrison's bank records through contacts in the financial industry. The records showed regular deposits that didn't match the agency's legitimate income, and expenditures on luxury cars, expensive vacations, and high-stakes gambling. Here's the really sick part, Mickey continued. Morrison specifically targets struggling actors who are desperate to keep their representation. He knows they won't question him because they're afraid of being dropped by the agency. Charles felt his anger building. It was one thing to steal from successful actors who could afford the losses. It was another thing entirely to steal from people who were already struggling to make ends meet. Mickey, I want you to document everything. Every theft, every victim, every dollar. And I want you to find out if anyone else at the agency knows what Michael is doing. The investigation took another month and revealed that Morrison wasn't working alone. His accounting manager, Jennifer Walsh, was actively helping to conceal the thefts by creating fake deduction forms and forged commission statements. But the senior agents at Morrison and Associates, including some of Charles's personal friends, appeared to be unaware of the embezzlement scheme. Charles faced a difficult decision. He could quietly leave Morrison and Associates and find a new agent, avoiding the scandal but allowing Morrison to continue stealing from other actors. Or he could expose the whole operation, knowing it would destroy the agency and put dozens of innocent employees out of work. Charles chose justice over convenience. He called Detective Maria Santos of the LAPD White Collar Crime Division. Detective Santos, I need to report systematic embezzlement at a major talent agency. We're talking about hundreds of victims and nearly $1 million in stolen money. Charles provided all of Mickey's evidence, plus testimony from the actors who'd been victimized. Detective Santos was impressed by the thoroughness of the investigation. Mr. Bronson, this is one of the most comprehensive fraud cases I've ever seen. You've basically done our job for us. I want to make sure Morrison can't destroy evidence or flee before you arrest him. How quickly can you move? We'll have arrest warrants by tomorrow morning. Michael Morrison was arrested at his Beverly Hills office on a Wednesday afternoon in June 1981. The arrest made front-page news in Variety and The Hollywood Reporter. Major talent agent charged with embezzling from clients, read the headline, along with details about the 3-year theft scheme. Jennifer Walsh was arrested the same day and immediately agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. But the real drama came when Charles held a press conference to announce that he was organizing a class action lawsuit on behalf of all Morrison's victims. For 3 years, Michael Morrison has been systematically stealing from the actors he was supposed to represent, Charles told the assembled media. He targeted struggling performers who depended on him for their careers, knowing they would be too afraid to question his accounting. Charles looked directly into the cameras. This isn't just about money. This is about trust. Actors put their careers, their livelihoods, their dreams in the hands of their agents. Michael Morrison betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. The press conference generated enormous publicity and encouraged other Morrison clients to come forward. Within a week, over 60 actors had joined the class action lawsuit. The case went to trial 8 months later. Charles testified for 3 hours, detailing how he discovered the embezzlement and conducted his own investigation. His testimony was devastating for Morrison's defense. Michael Morrison didn't just steal money, Charles told the jury. He stole from people who trusted him, people who couldn't afford to lose what little they had. He preyed on actors who were already struggling, making their lives even harder so he could live in luxury. Michael Morrison was convicted on 47 counts of embezzlement and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Jennifer Walsh received 3 years and was ordered to pay full restitution. The class action lawsuit recovered $650,000 in stolen money, which was distributed among the victims. Charles donated his portion of the settlement to the Screen Actors Guild Emergency Fund for struggling performers. But the Morrison case had consequences beyond just the criminal convictions. The scandal led to new regulations requiring talent agencies to provide detailed accounting statements to their clients and to maintain separate escrow accounts for client funds. The Screen Actors Guild also established a fraud hotline where actors could report suspicious financial practices by agents or managers. Morrison and Associates closed permanently after the scandal. The senior agents who'd been unaware of Michael's crimes formed a new agency with strict financial oversight and transparency policies. 5 years later, in 1986, Charles received a letter from Sarah Williams, the young actress who'd suspected Morrison was stealing from her but had been too afraid to speak up. Dear Mr. Bronson, I wanted you to know that the money I recovered from the Morrison lawsuit allowed me to stay in Los Angeles and continue pursuing my acting career. Without that settlement, I would have had to move back home and give up my dreams. More importantly, you taught me that I don't have to accept being victimized by people in positions of power. You showed me that even the biggest names in Hollywood can be held accountable if someone has the courage to fight them. I'm now working regularly in television and have been able to help other young actors avoid similar scams. Every time I hear about financial irregularities at agencies or management companies, I think about what you did and I speak up. Thank you for teaching me that justice is more important than keeping quiet. Sarah Williams. Charles kept that letter for the rest of his life. When Charles died in 2003, Sarah Williams, by then a successful producer and advocate for actors' rights, spoke at his memorial service. Charles Bronson could have quietly left Morrison and Associates when he discovered they were stealing from him, she told the assembled mourners. He was wealthy enough that the stolen money didn't matter to his lifestyle. He was famous enough that any agency in town would have been happy to represent him. She paused, looking out at the crowd of actors, directors, and industry professionals. But Charles understood something that some people never learn: when you have power and resources, you have a responsibility to use them to protect people who don't have power and resources. He destroyed his own business relationship to save the careers of actors he barely knew. Today, the Charles Bronson Center for Entertainment Industry Ethics provides education and advocacy for performers who are being financially exploited. The center has helped recover over $2 million in stolen funds and has assisted in the prosecution of dozens of fraudulent agents and managers. Above the center's entrance is a quote from Charles's testimony in the Morrison trial. Trust is the foundation of this industry. When someone betrays that trust, they don't just hurt their victims, they damage the entire business. That's why fraud must be exposed and punished, no matter how powerful the perpetrator. That's the Charles Bronson story that should be remembered. Not just the vigilante movies, but the man who discovered his agent was stealing from struggling actors and chose to destroy a corrupt system rather than quietly benefit from it. Because sometimes being tough means giving up your own advantages to protect people who have no advantages at all. Sometimes it means choosing justice over convenience, even when convenience would be easier and more profitable. Charles Bronson understood that. And hundreds of actors had better, more honest representation because he did.